The conflict in the Pacific, a theatre of brutal attrition, witnessed clashes of steel and spirit against a backdrop of relentless humidity and suffocating vegetation. The American forces, tenacious and resourceful, found themselves confronting a challenge of unprecedented complexity on the island of Bougainville, a strategic nexus in the archipelago. There, amidst the verdant tapestry of the jungle, lay the Hornet's Nest, a meticulously engineered fortification that defied conventional assault. It was not a mere collection of foxholes and hastily erected barricades, but a sophisticated labyrinth of interconnected bunkers, each a testament to the enemy's ingenuity and grim determination. Reinforced with layers of concrete and indigenous materials, these strongholds were designed to absorb the punishing blows of heavy artillery, their surfaces expertly camouflaged to blend seamlessly with the surrounding foliage, rendering them virtually invisible from aerial reconnaissance. More ominous still was the intricate network of interlocking fields of fire, designed to channel any advancing force into a gauntlet of withering fire, ensuring that every inch of ground gained came at a horrific cost in human lives. The Hornet's Nest was, in essence, a killing ground, a subterranean fortress that seemed impervious to any conventional strategy. Each attempt to breach its defences resulted in a bloodbath, the dense jungle echoing with the cries of the wounded and the deafening roar of explosions. The Americans, driven by a relentless resolve to secure the island, found themselves in a desperate race against time. Every lost life was a stark reminder of the urgency of the situation. The need for an innovative solution, a method to overcome this seemingly insurmountable obstacle, became paramount. Faced with the escalating sophistication of the enemy's defences, the American forces embarked on a journey of tactical evolution, experimenting with a range of systematic approaches, each designed to neutralize the deadly effectiveness of the fortified positions. A solution was required, one that could provide a means of advance, offering protection from constant fire, withstanding the impacts of the light weaponry, while simultaneously dislodging the enemy from their fortified shelters. The answer, born from the crucible of necessity, arrived on January 30th, 1944. 5 Stuart light tanks, transformed by a brutally innovative weapon, lumbered towards the heart of the Hornet's Nest, ready to unleash a force as terrifying as it was devastating. These vehicles, unlike their conventional counterparts, did not carry bullets or explosive projectiles. Instead, they carried a volatile cargo, liquid fire, projected with lethal precision, promising to transform the battlefield into a searing inferno, a trap for those who sought refuge within the bunkers and those who dared to wield the weapon. The United States, a late entrant into the global conflict not due to any deficit of industrial strength or moral fibre, but fueled by a resolute desire to avert a repetition of the catastrophic carnage of World War I, found itself, upon entering the fray, at a technological disadvantage compared to its adversaries, particularly in the realm of one of the most dreaded weapons of modern warfare, the flamethrower. Germany and Japan, recognizing the potential of this fearsome instrument, had already deployed both rudimentary and advanced versions of the flamethrower, employing them to devastating effect on various battlefields. Spurred by harrowing reports of the intense combat unfolding in the Pacific jungles, the American military, with characteristic urgency, commenced the development of its own model. Thus, in 1941, the M1 flamethrower was born, a compact portable device engineered to flush out entrenched enemies. The M1 consisted of 2 fuel tanks, strapped to the operator's back, a pressurized nitrogen cylinder for propellant, and an ignition wand that could hurl a stream of burning liquid up to 20 yards. Yet, this theoretical prowess soon encountered the harsh reality of combat. The humid, dense, and unforgiving jungles of the Pacific proved to be a crucible for the M1's weaknesses, highlighting its inherent instability. The ignition system, reliant on an electrical spark or a pilot flame, frequently failed in the face of incessant rain, buffeting winds or stifling humidity. Operators, driven to desperation, often resorted to improvising with handlighters, fully aware that any misstep could prove fatal. The weight of the equipment, exceeding 60 pounds, rendered the operator slow and conspicuously visible. Flamethrower operators instantly became priority targets for the enemy, often cut down before they could even engage the enemy. Fuel leaks or ignition malfunctions could result in the soldier becoming engulfed in flames before firing a single burst. Despite these terrifying shortcomings, the potential of the weapon remained undeniable. It could seep into every crack and crevice of a bunker, cling to walls, and saturate every corner with suffocating smoke and searing flames. It was, quite literally, bottled hell. It was against this backdrop in the middle of 1943 that an unexpected concept emerged, born from the fertile ground of practicality on a training field. On the island of New Caledonia, an officer from the 754th Tank Battalion, closely observing the tribulations of the infantry operators during flamethrower drills, conceived a solution as audacious as it was pragmatic. His proposition: mount a flamethrower inside the turret of an M3A1, Stuart light tank, and fire it through the gun ports designed for secondary weapons. While official records remain ambiguous regarding the identity of this officer, numerous accounts attribute the idea to Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Hart, the battalion commander. It was an admittedly crude, improvised, and inherently dangerous solution, yet it possessed a certain tactical logic. A tank could close the distance to enemy positions, shielding its crew from small arms fire, enabling the flamethrower to be operated with a degree of safety that infantry operators could never hope to achieve. However, the practical implementation of this novel concept quickly revealed its own set of limitations. Inadequate fuel pressure, restricted flamethrower maneuverability from within the confines of the turret, and the ever-present threat of accidental ignition posed significant risks to both the enemy and the crew. Despite these formidable challenges, what commenced as a desperate improvisation marked a critical juncture in the evolution of armoured warfare. From these initial experiments would emerge the specialised flamethrower tank, a lethal fusion of armour and fire, which would prove to be a decisive factor in the brutal campaigns of the Pacific Theatre. The M1 flamethrower, on its own, was a formidable weapon, but when integrated into the armoured frame of a tank, it became a symbol of the sheer ferocity that characterised that conflict. The interior of the M3A1 Stuart light tank was, to say the least, confining, its limited space barely accommodating a crew of 2 men. To contemplate introducing a full-sized flamethrower into that same compartment seemed bordering on the impossible. The tactical imperative of the moment left no room for reservation. Experience gained in recent engagements, particularly during the bloody Battle of New Georgia, in July 1943, had underscored a pressing need. American forces required an armoured solution that could effectively counter the entrenched Japanese defences that were resistant to artillery barrages, impervious to airstrikes, and virtually impenetrable. A weapon was needed that could break the deadlock, devastate enemy fortifications, and, above all, protect its operators. It was on the island of New Caledonia, near Noumea, that American military engineers commenced their experiments with a daring solution. They carefully dismantled the M1A1 flamethrower, shortened its barrel, redesigned its internal components, and reconfigured its fuel tanks to fit within the confined space of the Stuart. 2 5-gallon gasoline cans were strategically installed, one beneath the gunner's seat and the other replacing the ammunition depot. The flamethrower nozzle was then adapted to fire from the ball mount previously intended for the .30 caliber machine gun. It was an improvised design, a testament to artisanal execution, but with devastating potential. In October 1943, these modified prototypes were dispatched to the 3rd Marine Tank Battalion for evaluation. A meticulous and tense demonstration was organised near Noumea, attended by high-ranking officers from the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. All present understood the significance of the moment. The amphibious assault on Bougainville was scheduled for November 1st, and these flamethrower tanks were regarded as critical components in breaching the Japanese defences. However, the logistical and mechanical intricacies of war rarely conform to the timelines dictated by strategy. When the first wave of American troops landed on the shores of Bougainville, the flamethrower tanks were not yet operational. It was not until January 1944, during the Army's endeavours to expand the initial beachhead, that these weapons finally made their combat debut. The 754th Tank Battalion, a unit that had been deployed in the Pacific since the early months of 1942, had undergone a profound transformation. What had begun as a light tank formation had evolved into a formidable and feared armoured force. Under the command of Major Riolainen, the unit arrived on Bougainville with a new doctrine. It was no longer merely about engaging in firefights, but about delivering overwhelming devastation. Their Stuart tanks, now armed with liquid fire, embodied this new phase of warfare. On January 30th, 1944, this new weapon was put to the test in one of the most treacherous terrains of the Pacific Theatre, the so-called Hornet's Nest, situated southeast of Empress Augusta Bay. The perimeter was defended by a dense network of log bunkers and subterranean fortifications, manned by units of the 2nd Battalion of the 4th South Seas Garrison. These positions, stretching from the eastern bank of the Torokina River to the vicinity of Mavaya village, posed a direct threat to American control of the coastline. The initial assaults by the 132nd Infantry Regiment faltered in the face of tenacious enemy resistance. Conventional weaponry proved ineffective. Even portable flamethrowers, while useful at close range, fatally exposed their operators to withering Japanese crossfire. Faced with this precarious situation, General John Hodge, commander of the American Division, ordered the deployment of elements from the 754th Tank Battalion, including the Stuart tanks that had been converted into flamethrower tanks. The offensive commenced at 7:45 a.m. with a smoke mortar bombardment, followed by fire from 81mm mortars and an intense artillery barrage. 30 minutes later, at 8:30 a.m., Company C of the 132nd Infantry Regiment began its advance, moving forward behind the tanks in skirmish lines, with demolition teams poised to act in their wake. What ensued was a chaotic tableau of fire, smoke and steel. Shortly after 9 a.m, tragedy struck from within. A miscalculated Allied artillery shell landed directly on one of the lead tanks. The Stuart was instantly engulfed in flames. Staff Sergeant J. Hall, the vehicle commander, perished instantly. 2 more crew members sustained severe injuries. Corporal Joe Simon, in an act of desperate valour, managed to escape the burning Inferno but was cut down by enemy fire while attempting to rescue his comrades. His sacrifice earned him a posthumous Silver Star. Meanwhile, Japanese fire intensified with unrelenting ferocity. Sergeant Jesse Drowley, positioned nearby with Company B, witnessed the unfolding catastrophe. Without hesitation, he abandoned his cover and charged through a hail of bullets towards the wounded. With the deafening roar of combat filling his ears and explosions shaking the ground, he managed to reach them and drag them to safety. His heroic actions became one of the most poignant and courageous moments of that infernal day. What transpired that day within the Hornet's Nest was more than a battle. It was a collision of technological desperation, tactical improvisation, and the brutal realities of modern warfare. The flamethrower, now mounted on tracks, not only transformed the landscape of war in the Pacific Islands, but left an indelible mark on those who wielded it and those who faced it. Flamethrower tanks began to demonstrate beyond any shadow of a doubt their lethal effectiveness on the Pacific battlefield, their capacity to spearhead frontal assaults and obliterate enemy fortifications that had withstood conventional fire, made them instruments of destruction, as innovative as they were terrifying. Japanese defensive structures, particularly reinforced log bunkers and caves concealed within the dense tropical vegetation, posed a formidable challenge to light artillery and direct infantry assaults. But now, with the modified Stuarts armed with M1 flamethrowers, those positions could be eradicated in a matter of seconds. The liquid fire seeping through openings, tunnels, and crevices, consumed the air and annihilated both structures and wills. Yet, even with the addition of steel plates designed to protect the flamethrower operators, the tanks remained vulnerable. Dangers emanated not only from the enemy, but also from the inherent volatility of the combustion system itself. During the height of the assault on the Hornet's nest, an M3A1 equipped with a flamethrower was engaged in a frontal assault against a Japanese bunker that had immobilized an entire company of American infantry with sustained fire. The flamethrower operator managed to position himself adequately and unleashed a long burst of gelatinous fuel onto the bunker. However, the ignition mechanism failed. The fuel drenched the enemy structure but did not ignite. The tension was immediate. The operator knew he would not have a second chance. In a desperate decision, yet executed with heroic clarity, he opened the tank's upper hatch and, amidst a hail of enemy bullets that impacted mere centimetres from his body, hurled a thermite grenade directly onto the spilled liquid. An instant later, a searing flash illuminated the landscape. The bunker was consumed by an infernal conflagration, transforming it into a burning pyre. Its interior became a death trap. All of the Japanese defenders within were incinerated in a matter of seconds. It was an act of sheer determination, a fusion of ingenuity, courage, and sacrifice that exemplified the brutality of combat in the Pacific. The Japanese response was not long in coming. At 10:30 a.m., recognizing the existential threat posed by the flamethrower tanks to their defensive positions, the Japanese launched a counterattack. With mortar fire calibrated directly onto the armoured units and a barrage of Molotov cocktails, they sought to neutralise the Stuarts at their weakest point, their limited capacity for prolonged resistance, and the vulnerability of their crews to direct impacts. Second Lieutenant John White and Sergeant James Jay lost their lives instantly when their tank was struck by an enemy projectile that detonated one of the internal fuel tanks. It was a terrifying explosion that scarred the air with a mushroom cloud of fire and black smoke. Yet, the will to fight remained unextinguished. Sergeant Jesse Drowley, who had witnessed the event and had already become a near mythical figure among his comrades, responded with almost superhuman strength. As the combat intensified and the American line began to fragment, Drowley identified a hidden machine gun nest that had managed to evade both tank fire and infantry detection. This firing point was wreaking havoc, decimating reinforcements attempting to advance. Without hesitation, Drowley charged across open ground, traversing a gauntlet of crossfire until reaching the nearest flamethrower tank. He clambered onto the armoured vehicle, pounded on the turret with his rifle butt, and through shouts and gestures indicated the enemy position to the crew. The tank fired, but missed its target. Visibility from within was limited. The chaos of the surrounding combat hindered precision. It was then that Drowley made a decision as reckless as it was crucial. He procured a submachine gun equipped with tracer ammunition, and, amidst the whistling bullets and obscuring smoke, fired a controlled sequence of bursts towards the machine gun nest. The incandescent trails of the tracer bullets served as a guide for the tank crew. At that very instant, Drowley was struck in the face and chest. He crumpled to his knees, bleeding profusely, partially blinded. But he did not retreat. Despite his wounds, he refused to be evacuated until he had confirmed that the enemy position had been completely neutralized. Only when the sea of fire engulfed the Japanese trench did he accept the assistance of his staggering companions. Subsequently, Drowley was awarded the Medal of Honor in a solemn ceremony presided over by President Franklin D. Roosevelt himself. His story, a testament to individual courage in the face of annihilation, became a symbol of a war where daily heroism was the only barrier between life and death. By early afternoon, the flamethrower tanks were compelled to temporarily withdraw. Their systems required refueling and repressurization, as each burst of flame lasted a mere 20 seconds, and their supply lines were long and vulnerable. At 1:30 p.m., 5 Stuarts equipped with flamethrowers returned to the front, rejoining the combat with renewed intensity. In close coordination with the infantry, they initiated a methodical process of eradicating Japanese fortifications. By the end of the day, they had incinerated and destroyed a total of 28 bunkers. Of these, 14 were directly attributed to flamethrower tanks, with the remainder being the result of the combined efforts of portable flamethrowers, rifle fire and mortar fire. The Battle of the Hornet's Nest, in retrospect, became a pivotal moment in the evolution of armoured warfare in the Pacific Theatre. For the first time, the operational effectiveness of armour armed with liquid fire as a means of breaching static and heavily fortified lines was demonstrably proven. What had begun as an improvised solution on Bougainville, born of desperation and necessity, crystallised into a formal doctrine. By the middle of 1944, purpose-built flamethrower tanks, such as the feared Satan, an adaptation of the M4 Sherman, began to be incorporated into American arsenals, just in time for the campaigns on Saipan, Guam, and other fortified islands of the Central Pacific. Bougainville, with its dense jungles and concealed enemies, had served as the brutal laboratory for this tactical evolution. Through fire and steel, the flamethrower tank and infantry team not only earned its place in American strategy, but rewrote the rules of armoured assault in the jungle. Since antiquity, fire has been a tool as primitive as it is terrifying in the art of war. Its capacity to devastate not only physical structures but also enemy morale has been recognised by generations of combatants. However, it was not until the industrial horrors of World War I that the modern flamethrower emerged as a specialised combat instrument. Even then, its acceptance within the United States Army remained lukewarm. Military high command harboured scepticism regarding its true utility on the battlefield. For many officers, the flamethrower was a dangerous novelty, an artefact of questionable effectiveness, whose operation entailed extreme risks for the operator. As a consequence, the weapon remained marginalised for years, underestimated in both its destructive capacity and its tactical potential. Much of the impetus that would eventually reverse this perception did not originate in Washington offices or military academies, but from the very mud, sweat, and blood of the Pacific theatre of operations. It was in the humid jungles and scorching beaches of the South Pacific, where American soldiers confronted an entrenched, concealed enemy, absolutely determined to resist to the last man. In 1943, driven by the dire need to breach deeply entrenched Japanese defences and fuelled by improvised initiatives from units in the field, engineers began adapting portable flamethrowers to the interiors of light tanks like the M3 Stuart. These conversions, though rudimentary, mark the dawn of a new era in armoured warfare, when, in 1944, the axis of combat shifted from the jungles of the South Pacific to the coral and volcanic islands of the Central Pacific, territories like Saipan, Guam, Iwo Jima, and Peleliu. Combat became even more brutal and claustrophobic. Japanese strategy evolved. It was no longer about maintaining simple defence lines on the ground, but about creating intricate underground complexes excavated in volcanic rock, interconnected caves, escape tunnels, and fortified firing positions capable of withstanding days of bombardment. In this context, tank-mounted flamethrowers ceased to be a tactical rarity and became an urgent necessity, one of the few weapons capable of clearing out caves and destroying enemy garrisons without risking an entire infantry company. In stark contrast, the European theatre did not offer the same conditions for the deployment of flamethrower tanks. The mobile nature of war in Western Europe, with constantly advancing fronts, wide open plains, and cities that were bombed but not fortified with rock, made these systems play a marginal role compared to the specific needs of the Pacific. The doctrinal rigidity of the American Army also contributed to this divergence. While Marines in the Pacific experimented with almost desperate pragmatism, European commands adhered more closely to the classic mechanized model of infantry and armour. During World War II, the American Army developed three primary variants of tank flamethrowers. The most impactful, and undoubtedly the most effective, was the version that replaced the tank's main armament with a long-range flamethrower, capable of projecting a stream of fire for dozens of meters. It was ideal for attacking fortifications and cave entrances from safe positions. Auxiliary versions were also manufactured, replacing bow machine guns or being integrated into roof periscopes. While their range and volume of fire were limited, they still made a significant contribution. However, these secondary systems could not compare in power with their main armament counterparts. Curiously, the earliest antecedent of American flamethrower tanks dates back to 1917. During World War I, Major Harold Adams of the Corps of Engineers conceived a long-range flamethrower based on a steam boiler, capable of propelling an atomized fuel oil mixture to a distance exceeding 80 meters. His vision culminated in the design of an experimental vehicle, a steam tank inspired by British rhomboid models, equipped with 500 horsepower steam engines and a Mark I flame projector at the front. On the sides, reinforced railings housed caliber machine guns. In September 1918, the peculiar machine was shipped to France and subjected to a private demonstration before General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force, AEF, near Chaumont. The project was sharply criticised by Colonel Amos Fries, then the chemical officer of the AEF, who declared with certainty, "The use of liquid fire or flamethrowers is rapidly becoming obsolete in all armies. The manpower, expense, and danger to our own troops using these devices are so great that they make other means of attack preferable in practically all cases." Fries not only dismissed the innovation, but also exerted decisive influence in its cancellation. Shortly thereafter, the armistice of November 1918 buried the project entirely. The post-war era brought years of neglect. Flamethrower research was transferred to the newly formed Chemical Warfare Service, CWS, ironically led in its early years by Amos Fries himself, whose hostility towards the weapon shaped an entire generation of development. A subsequent CWS study on the lessons of the Great War categorized the flamethrower as one of the conflict's greatest technological failures. For nearly 2 decades, no substantial resources were allocated to its improvement. It was not until 1940, on the eve of another global conflict, that the spectre of the flamethrower began to re-emerge, driven by reports on the use of flamethrower tanks by Italian forces in Abyssinia and German panzer divisions in Poland. The American Army approved the development of a prototype designated the Mechanized Transport Flamethrower. With limited resources, the CWS, working from Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland, adapted the E-1 flamethrower to an obsolete Cunningham T-2 mortar carrier due to a lack of available modern tanks. The first tests exposed multiple mechanical and operational deficiencies. However, after a series of modifications, the model was presented to the newly created armoured force. Their verdict was clear: any flamethrower must be installed on a medium combat tank, not an obsolete vehicle. The Cunningham project was discarded, but what had begun as a relegated idea slowly began to take shape. The urgency of the conflict in the Pacific, the pressure from frontline units, and the brutality of Japanese resistance forced a conceptual transformation. What was once an experimental oddity became, through fire, steel, and sacrifice, an essential component of modern warfare in the Pacific. The legacy of the flamethrower tank, forged in the crucible of necessity and tempered by the valor of its crews, remains a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of the American soldier in the face of unimaginable adversity.